Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Dr. Javed Iqbal Kokar, Professor of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology. And as we are discussing personal identity, and this is the fifth lecture of this series, and today I'll be discussing the preservation and dispatch of the trace evidence. The material which we collected in the previous lecture we have discussed, and now how it will be preserved and dispatched. So these will be my contents of the talk, that preservation and the dispatch of the trace evidences. So what should be the procedure of preservation? The preservation of the specimen is normally by two processes we do it. The first is the desiccation or dehydration. That is, we dry up the things and they get preserved by dehydration. And secondly, by freezing. When we freeze the biological material, it is frozen and it gets preserved. But situation depends what test has to be carried out afterward. Because if the cellular detail is required, then the freezing is not recommended, because by freezing the cellular detail will be lost. So preservation in different situation is different. For histopathological specimens, we need a preservative which should preserve the specimen and prevent the autolysis. And likewise, simultaneously, it should harden the tissues so that later on in the lab, when they cut the slices for histopathological examination, it should be ready for the purpose. And for the chemical examination, we only require the preservation. Not the other details are required. For serological examination, we need to add anticoagulant material. So the blood should not clot. So what are the qualities of a good preservative? Usually a small question comes in the university. What are the qualities of good preservative? So good preservative should be cheap. It should be readily available, easily available everywhere. And it should be chemically inert. That means it should not interact with the specimen and also not with the container or anything else. It should be chemical inert. And it should be effective for the purpose, that if your purpose is to preserve only, it should fulfill the criteria. And if it is the preservation and prevent the autolysis, then the criteria will be different and it should be effective for that purpose. And it should not react with the container and specimen, and which I have also discussed in the previous slide, that it should be chemically inert. So normally what preservatives we use? For chemical analysis, it is usually the supersaturated saline. And how it acts? It extracts water from the tissues. Tissues get dehydrated. While being kept in saturated saline, they get dehydrated because the hypertonic solution is outside the tissues and it extracts water from the tissues. They get dehydrated and hence get preserved. And for histopathological purposes, it is 10% formal saline. 10% formalin is added in supersaturated saline, or 95% alcohol is used for histopathological specimens. For serological examination, the anticoagulant which are used, that is calcium oxalate, heparin, or any other anticoagulant, they are used to prevent the coagulation. So, in brief, for histopathological, the material of the container should be of plastic, large mouth, and with a plastic lid, and it should be in 10% formal saline, which is the preservative. And for chemical analysis, preferable is glass container, depending upon the size, in which size, what content you are putting in. and a glass lid should be there. And saturated saline, supersaturated saline is used in these cases. And for serology or testing on the fluids, the sterile or sterilized test tubes are used. And the test tubes are of standard size, they are of glass, or they having the glass or the rubber stopper. And the anticoagulant is added in the serology cases. Then labeling is very important. Each container should be labeled and it should indicate the number of the jar, because how many jars you are collecting, jar number 1, jar number 2, jar number 3, it should be mentioned. Then the name of the specimen which you have put in and site of the collection, specimen from where you have collected, it should be written on the label. And what preservative you have added, you should write it on the label. Then the postmortem report number or the medical legal report number is added, date and time of collection, the name of the person who is collecting, that is the doctor, and examination which is required, that is to be mentioned. Now in the end, the complete name of the doctor, signature, and with the official seal is affixed. Then the all specimens are sealed, and for that purpose we use the sealing wax so that it should avoid tampering, and it should also the safe chain of custody should be maintained for that purpose. So all the containers, then they are put in one box, and that box should also be labeled indicating the upside and indicating all the addresses where it is going. Then the arrow for the upside is marked, box should be sealed, and it should accompany the forwarding letter. And forwarding letter should contain the information which is sent along. Basically, what is required is the copy of the MLC or the postmortem report, and what examination is required, and the request of the letter should contain the biodata and the name of the specimen, copy of the FIR, copy of the inquest report, and specimen of the seal which you have fixed, so that it should be compared with. Then the dispatch of the specimen is by the doctor through various sources, and it should be always at the time of examination, but when it is the odd hour at the time, then they should be kept in safe storage. And the safe storage should be that the specimen should be kept in lock and key in the freezers, and they should be registered, and the seal should be intact. It should be compared with the specimen of the seal provided. Then regarding the transportation, the specimen are transported through police. Usually we hand over to the police and get the receipt, or through railway parcel, or through postal, or through special messenger. But preferably it is done in our country through the police, and we get the receipt of police. So thank you very much. This is all about the preservation and the dispatch of the test.